righty. We are more than halfway through February. We're a week away from the Combine, which is exciting. This is the PFF Forecast, February 17th, 2020. We've got some fun stuff. We're going to talk a little XFL Week 2. Promise to keep it light and fun. I took copious notes. I'm ready to go. You're going to talk a little bit more about the XFL in reality. We're going to do the Draft Captial segment that we tried to do last week that we butchered, and this one is right. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting.
We could even take a look at how it was butchered, right? I mean,
we don't have to.
We don't have to go
in and talk about the failed surgery. We just look at the one that was successful, but maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
And then we've got some mean tweets. We got a good story from the Cincy Y. Be a good pod. So let's rock.
All right.
You ready to go here?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
XFL Week 2. So I have some takeaways.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you ready to listen to them? Because you're a good friend of mine, and I value the things that you value, and so I didn't want to just go an entire weekend of not participating in something that you were participating in. So, first game of the weekend, the Guardians, they played the DC Defenders, and really, Cardale Jones, why does he not get a chance in the NFL? That's my takeaway from the game.
Interestingly, the best part about the league is that there are some quarterbacks who have clearly gotten like 800 chances in the NFL, and they go to this league and they suck, like Landry Jones. Oh, look, Landry Jones sucks. Basically like every white quarterback that's been a backup in the league for like 5 years.
You mean like, for example, Matt McGloin?
Yeah, like Matt McGloin's horrible. But then it's sort of like the quarterbacks that we sort of traditionally undervalue the draft season, like shorter guys, African-American guys. They come in this league and, oh, hey, they can play, like Philip Walker or Cardale Jones, right? For whatever reason, we undervalue certain players, and then they end up playing well. Jordan Tiamu, who was a cluster one quarterback.
We're going to get to him. I have a special. I'm very excited about that.
But these guys that were like, oh my, like the spread, and granted they actually ended up covering, but like the spread on the game, the first game yesterday, was like growing when they're like, oh my God, Landry Jones is playing, guys. Let's get this thing out to a touchdown. And it's like, Landry Jones sucks. Okay, the only reason they won the game is because they handed the ball off to Cameron Artis-Payne, and he ran well. So
the New York Guardians lost 27-0 to Cardale Jones and the DC Defenders. And this begs the question. If you replaced DC quarterbacks, you swapped DC quarterbacks, Cardale Jones and Dwayne Haskins, would anyone know?
Oh my God. Well, that was like Greg Gabe was throwing shade because he said they're the first DC football team to shut a team out since 91. I think you would notice, because I do think Haskins is very good, for a young player. But your point is well taken.
Who would be the first NFL quarterback to get benched for a interview that happened during the game?
That would be Matt McGloin.
No, like in the NFL.
Oh, in the NFL, Rivers.
Ooh. He's not currently on a team.
Yeah, that's true. But he totally looked like so McGloin totally looked like he bought into a situation. Kevin Gilbride's a former NFL coach for a long time, won a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator twice, gets in there, wins a starting job, wins a game, but then comes up for water. He's like, holy crap, we're run, pass, and I suck. And he's like, okay, I'm going to start just blaming everybody.
I think Rivers is a good call, but it's hard to bench a guy that's been in the league for a while. I think that Baker Mayfield is up there.
Yeah. Would he get benched?
I mean,
sort of my question.
I don't know. All right, next game. So you like my analysis there?
I loved it. Loved it.
The Tampa Bay Vipers lost to the Seattle Dragons 17-9, which means this was literally just a Seattle Seahawks game.
Yeah, well, and there are no normal Seattle games. So Tampa Bay's quarterback Aaron Murray was hurt. They have yet to score an offensive touchdown in 2 weeks with former MSU Dragon quarterback head coach Mark Trestman. And there were two basically pick sixes in that game.
So the thing that was interesting about this game was they have Trestman mic'd up. And I forget what the exact score was, right? But it has fourth and was it 1 or 2?
Yeah, and he's just like, punt. We have to punt.
We have to punt. And that was exciting. That was interesting. It got people really excited and angry, and it was ultimately it's bad for the XFL, I think, because they're not a good enough league where you can have people making stupid decisions like that and ultimately capitalize. And it gets me back to my big gripe with these leagues, which is how can you be so stupid as to not understand what you have to do differently to make the game better?
Well, that's the whole thing, and this brings us up to a point. I think I'm going to write about this week when it comes to how to change your franchise in the NFL. There are all these teams that are like, God, it hasn't worked. And like I've said this about politics, I've said this about everyday life. The solution to X not working is not more X, right? Like Mark Trestman's like, look, I really want to get, my 2-year tenure as the Bears head coach sucked, what am I going to do? Well, the solution isn't to do the thing that you sucked at better. It's to do something different, right? And it's like you look at Kansas City, you look at New England, you look at the Baltimore, you look at the teams in the NFL that are really good. What do? They do something different than everybody else does, right? The Ravens took an offense, took a quarterback at 32 because they've never been bad enough to have to take one at 5, and they just made an offense that was different. The Chiefs, won 70% of their games with Alex Smith, and we're like, it's just not working. So they did something exactly opposite of Alex Smith.
You bring this back to the Chiefs
all the time.
But how's that possible? No, it's what we talked about with the AAF. You can't expect to have worse players and change the rules a little bit and be like, you know what? That's enough. These crappy players with this different rule set it's going to make for a way more interesting game. You have to talk to the coaches and be like, look, this is what empirical evidence tells us. You should go for 4th down and short all the time. You have nothing to lose. And then you explain to them that, hey, there's this groundswell of people who are looking at data and listening to what math tells you, and that you should really grab a hold of that because these are the fucking people that are watching your bullshit league on Saturday afternoon.
No, it's not the people that are the people that are watching your league are the gamblers and the DFS players.
Right, but they know. Yeah. That's my point. Yeah. Those people know.
Right.
No one that's gambling, no one that's spending their hard-earned money on that game is sitting there with Mark Trestman going, yeah, you have to fucking punt. No one, that's not the case. Gamblers, fantasy players, those are the smartest fans out there.
Yeah, but the thing is they're not. So here's the thing. If you're like me and you bet the under on every single game in the XFL, you're kind of like, oh, it's kind of neat that they go run pass, only because you're right about how bad they are, right? Like, the game, I think, becomes more predictable as it becomes more efficient for every team, right? Like if you bet the Ravens this year against the spread the entire year, you did great. But if every team played as efficiently as the Ravens, it'd be harder, right? Because then it would come down to more things, right? Like there's an edge you can have is literally looking and fading the dumb coaches and backing.
So you think it's good for the league?
I don't think it's good for the league. What I'm saying is the people that are watching the league acknowledge the inefficiencies and allow them to persist longer because they provide opportunities to gamble and play DFS and things like that. The fact that
because I think there's there's a really legitimate argument that you could say, actually, no, having stupid coaches mic'd up is really good for the league.
No, because I think
if you're going to do it, if you're going to have the AAF had Mike Martz out there, had no idea what the hell he was doing, but they didn't mic him up. So people made fun of him, but they weren't able to make fun of him in this way. Now, if you're willing to do this, if you're willing to put these guys on blast, it also forces them to confront these issues. So maybe it is the right move.
Yeah, no, I think here's the thing about the XFL, and I talked about this in our internal chat the other day. People are acting like this is way worse than the AF from a football standpoint. And no, the reality is we got to see the best 2 quarterbacks in the league play on Sunday, the last game. The AAF football was just as bad. The production value was worse, right? Obviously they were just running a traditional, script basically. And then the halftime shows were in some shed somewhere, it seemed like. And now, at least with the XFL, you have at least a little bit of the allusion to the gambling. You have a little bit you have obviously the access to the players, you have the access to the replay, which you also had in the AF, but you have access to the coaches. And you are seeing this idea of these coaches are sort of showing their ass very, very explicitly at times in how they think about things. And what has been one of the things, in my opinion, that has driven the NFL to more efficiency? It's the fact that we're having these conversations on Twitter, and we're having these conversations like over and over and over again. And while they're not persuading everybody, they're persuading some, for sure.
For sure.
Some, not everybody, for sure. I'm not saying that everybody, but I'm saying that like the level of conversation.
Technically, one or two people is some.
The level of conversation about the league has changed drastically in the NFL since even you and I started working together.
Yes.
But
I don't think it has anything to do with these. Like, this league is not creating anything new.
No, but the conversation. I mean, like, these people are watching this league, right? Like, whether it might not be Andy Reid or it might not be Belichick, but it might be their assistants. And if folks are talking these things out loud, like, we have our own hidden biases, right? As people, we see another person do the exact same thing as we do, and we're like, oh, that's stupid. And then like, oh wait, I do that too. It sort of, I think, gets us, because these people don't watch the NFL. If you're an NFL coach, you're playing your game on Sunday at noon. You watch like one game a week.
Yeah,
the broadcast copy.
But I would also say that you're going to sit there and you're going to go, okay, it's like watching college, maybe even worse. No one's saying, hey, these guys are NFL caliber players. So I do think it's a little tricky. All right, let me continue with my rundown here. The Dallas Renegades won 25-18 against the Los Angeles.
Your Los Angeles Wildcats.
My Los Angeles Wildcats. And this game was the Dallas Renegades rode on generational talent. Cameron Artis. Bring the pain.
They threw the ball like on their first 20 plays and then like established the run at the end of the game. It was actually kind of funny.
It was a testament to the fact that passing wins. I believe they handily won the passing and then the running battle, but not in the reverse order. But I want to get to the nightcap, which was the St. Louis Battlehawks, in easily, I think, the best game of the week. They lost to the Houston Roughnecks 28-24, despite running the ball 42 times compared to the Houston Roughnecks running just 17. I didn't know that was possible. I thought if you ran the ball more than twice as much as your opponent, you were guaranteed to win.
I'm wondering if you even hashtag watched the game, because here's the thing. So it
took you this long to figure it out?
I said on Twitter that somebody asked me who my favorite team is going to be, and I said whoever covers. And St. Louis did not win, but they got through the back door. They were +8 in the game. Our friend and colleague Ben Brown wrote that pickup. Good, nice little backdoor cover there, and they won, or they won outright as double-digit underdogs in week 1. I don't know how you're a double-digit underdog in the first week of a upstart league, but they were. And the only thing that kept my St. Louis Battlehawks from winning the game was Jordan Tiamu threw 2 picks that were run inside the 5-yard line. So the reason why Phillip Walker's numbers weren't like egregious from a yardage standpoint is they only had like 5 yards to go on 2 of their touchdown drives.
You had 5 drops.
They also
maybe I did watch the game.
Didn't have a lot of plays. They also didn't have a lot of plays because of the aforementioned turnovers, right? So like St. Louis controlled the football, but when your quarterback throws interceptions, it changes the game around. And it's kind of it's not refreshing to see, but it's interesting. Like, it's sort of a blast from the past, right? Quarterbacks don't throw that many interceptions anymore.
Yeah.
So games now in a different league where the quarterbacks are a lot worse turn on these turnovers.
Both quarterbacks. So this was actually a decent quarterback matchup. Obviously, the turnovers were a huge difference, but both these guys, over 80% of their throws from a clean pocket were catchable. Those are numbers that if you saw them in the NFL, you'd be like, okay,
there's something to work with here.
Something legit. And you mentioned Jordan Tiamu, who is a guy that his college numbers projected nicely into the NFL. And this is going to get into what we're going to talk about here in a second, which is, look, you just don't know a lot. There's a lot more that you don't know than you do know about these guys coming out of college. And if this league can hang on enough and be normal enough that a couple of quarterbacks can get some backup jobs, and then maybe one of them gets into a game and then plays well, like, that's what you need, right? That's the ticket.
There's so much in the college to pro projection that's difficult in the sense that there's a, when I used to study species distributions, it's the sort of thing of like, you want to study the projected volume of a species in a certain area. But there's also the probability of, frankly, detecting anything at the same time, right? So like it's sort of the exact same thing with college to pro. It's like you want to project how much volume this guy's going to create, but but you also have to project whether or not he even gets in the field to begin with, right? So I could tell you Philip Walker's X, Y, and Z, but what ultimately happened is he got on the Colts practice squad a couple times and just didn't get a chance. I could tell you about Deshaun Kaiser, and then we saw Deshaun Kaiser play a number of plays, and he sucked, right? So like, who had a better pro career? I would argue it's probably Philip Walker, because chances are if he would have gotten on the field, he would at least been better than Deshaun Kaiser. But then other people will say, well, he wasn't even good enough to get on the field. So it's a really interesting question. And one that we have to wrestle with as we project. I think quarterbacks are the most difficult one, because there's only one that plays at a time. If you're a safety, you're going to get on the field somehow if you're good enough. Special teams, but also linebacker, corner, safety, they all kind of play interchangeable positions. But quarterback, it's like there are only 32 guys that are playing at any given time, and you could just be, for a numbers game. We talk about the two guys we've worked with over the course. You have Bruce, who got on the field as a rookie, started 10 games, played 11 years. You had Zach, who was third string on a couple teams that were like pretty durable at quarterback. So he just never gets on the field, and we never get to see what he could be.
Yeah, and then you have Steve.
And you have Steve, who, is Steve.
700th round pick. Somehow ends up with the Jerry curl doing football. Here's the big thing about the XFL that I was very hesitant about whether it mattered or not, but everyone leaned into super hard, and there were some people saying, look, this is going to change like fucking broadcasting forever, which is, easy on the edibles. But how do you feel the broadcast has been so far? Because I got to be really honest with you, you were right. I watched like 2 snaps.
Yeah. It's not that hard to break down a game using our data, without having watched it. Although I like watching football more than you do.
Yes, just general football.
Yeah. So and it's just kind of interesting to watch it. But
also my girlfriend would have
you were
probably just left if I was like, hey, honey,
you were in DC.
The NFL season's over. We're gonna watch this semi-pro league.
My parents are still in town. They're taking care of the kids, so I can't remember what Steph was doing during one of the games, but she was out
crying,
shopping or something. And of course, I can barely walk, so I would have just been an impediment to her.
Your limp is getting worse.
Look, I just need to make it to the
cane. We need to get you a cane.
I almost bought a cane the other day, but I'm not going to.
I want to do a poll of what looks worse. You limping like someone shot you in the leg, or just owning up to it and having a cane.
Yeah.
I got to think it's the cane. I would even say go full-blown Harvey Weinstein Walker.
Wow.
No comparison between.
Almost nothing.
Yeah. But just the fact that he's using a walker.
Yeah. Okay.
Tennis balls.
So the broadcast. So here's the thing I will say. I think the broadcasts have been, if you want to judge them relative to an NFL broadcast, they've been about as good as the second or third group in Fox or CBS, So I think that they've been good. The issue is that now that they're allowed to talk about gambling, it almost always feels forced.
Yes.
So when
So how do you change that?
They're like, oh, look, the spread on the one of the Disney networks, right? The ESPN and ABC have the spread next to the favored team and over under right next to it. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, it's 6-0. Look, looks good for the under going into halftime.
And you're like,
and it's like, so in all honesty, and granted, I'm not an expert on, we do gambling stuff here, and I'm assuming that we'll miss out on things that people want from a gambling perspective. But if I'm looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, so LA yesterday drove all the way down inside the 5-yard line and basically mishandled the handoff and got recovered, right? And it was like a 6 or 7 minute drive that it resulted in a fumble in the red zone. It's literally the perfect drive if you bet on the under. And so somebody who's attuned to that kind of stuff would be like, that's a brilliant drive for under bettors or something like that, or driving all the way down, missing a field goal, or just or in the game, the last game between St. Louis and Houston, the 2 interceptions that were returned inside the 5 were the worst thing so you're like, having that discussion of what those big plays mean from the gambling perspective, I think is way better than the commentary of like, boy, this is a big drive for, St. Louis to come back and, backdoor cover, which is great and it's more than what you normally get, obviously, but it's not. To me, they're missing out on an opportunity.
Yes. So here's how I would sum it up. If you go on Twitter and you follow the people who are betting the game a certain way, they will comment on certain things, just as you said. And that's the type of comment that you want to make in the game. The issue is, and I hate to be this guy who's like, hey, if you don't bet, you shouldn't talk about it type deal, but I legitimately think it would help the broadcasters. So I'm not saying that you have to be like the NFL guys where like you get a snide comment in there, but those snide comments are damn well timed. And it's because they're attuned to what people who have bet on the game that way are watching for. Right? When Al Michaels makes a comment about, oh, that's underwhelming, he's doing so because he's so attuned to all of the components of the game that he knows if you're still watching this stupid-ass game right now, it's because you're interested in this way. That's, if you're going to talk about it more, then you need to be attuned to what the people that have bet in that way are watching. So you either need to bet it yourself, or you need to be so good at understanding that you can talk about it. And it's exactly what you said, right? When does this play, what are the plays that actually matter here for, betting the under or the over, or say things are turning against you. You had the favorite, they were up by 20, and now all of a sudden like shit's hit the fan. And so to me, that's what they are lacking. And I don't know if you can get that without bringing in people who are actually betting on the game themselves.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that
that's why that content's exciting.
They're going to have like a bet. I think they're going to do a betcast, which I think will be good. I always wonder what the proper balance is though, because at least for the NFL, not everybody bets on the NFL. So if you were to have some sort of like just a bet cast, I don't know if it would generate the audience maybe. But I think if you are in the XFL, I think it probably will hit because the majority of people that are watching the XFL are doing it because of gambling and DFS. I mean, I don't think that there's any other reason why people are watching this other than if you're a league professional and you're actually trying to scout these players, or you have some skin in the game, and as such, they should probably lean into it. But to your point, when somebody, and we've been, we were early on in this industry as well. Like when you say things that are wrong in the gambling space, they sound stupid, right? So like they're also trying to like be right. In which case, I think they're a little too safe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman had some issues with that early on when Fox was trying to like lean into it.
They said that the Cleveland Browns were the favorite to win the Super Bowl when in reality they had just taken the most bets.
Right. That's exactly what happened. So I would say, and personally, if I had to choose one or the other, I would rather just watch a professional broadcast because I can fucking see what's going on from a betting perspective. I don't need you to tell me about it. Like I don't think there's anything that cool about being overt about it.
Yeah.
Like that's not why people broadcast games. They broadcast the games to tell you what's happening, and there are certain people that are better at telling those stories than others, and that's why they're professional broadcasters. Anyway, so we've talked about the XFL for a very long time. Do you have anything else to say about it?
No.
I would say
lines are up already this week.
Ooh.
They're a lot more better friendly, I think, than the AAF, whose lines were up like Thursday or Friday.
Did you watch the All-Star game or any of those that NBA?
No, actually I didn't watch the last game. I was out with my family.
So you know what the Elam ending is?
No.
Okay, so what they did in the NBA All-Star game, which has been a joke forever, is that they at the end of the third quarter added 24 points to the team that was winning's total.
And
whoever got to that number first won the game. So it makes it. And it was only 24 points, which in the NBA is not a lot. So it made it a very compelling ending. And these teams were playing very, very hard. And it actually made the game exciting. And I was thinking about this from an NFL, XFL standpoint. And I was like, what if, overtime is exciting to a certain extent because if you score a touchdown, you win the game, right? What if, in the XFL, it was like first to 5 touchdowns or something?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is in a league like the XFL, the first to 5 touchdowns might take 4 hours.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying.
So the hard part about football. So I love it. I love the concept of basketball, and here's why: basketball is, and I could be wrong, but of the sports that we follow, is the least subject to variance out of all the
there's
sports.
so many possessions.
There's so many possessions. So 24 points is going to take, like the error bars and how long that's going to take to happen are pretty narrow. The NFL, it's like, if you, like, let's say you said 21 points, that could be done in a quarter. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or it could take 3 games worth of time. So I wonder, and then the hard part then is, okay, so what do you do after that? Do you do yards? Or do you do something less noisy? But like, even then, I think it's tough. I like the idea. I very much like that idea in basketball, especially. I mean, even from like the gambling perspective, you're like, okay, totals are what they are, type of thing, you know. And like,
I also think you could do it though, where if you took the team that's winning at the end of the third quarter and you added 8 points, so that in order for them to win the game, they have to score a touchdown and get a 2. You know, but if you're losing, you have to go balls to the wall, right? Because you got to score, you know, say you're down 10, you got to score 18, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going all out. I just thought it added an element of urgency that a lot of these games could really use. And here's the other thing. You always feel like you've got a chance. So I don't know. I thought that was cool about the All-Star game. I very much enjoyed watching it. All right. We are on to the next topic here, which is, so the draft is coming up. And we've had a lot of internal debate about how do you project players from college to the pro level, particularly at the quarterback position, because it's the lowest sample in terms of number of players, and it's the most high value, right? Because if you get it right, you're set.
To the victor go the spoils.
You get it wrong, you're probably looking for a new job. And here's the question. Let's start it off with this. We look at a guy like Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield had 3 years of awesome play at Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. You look at a guy then like Joe Burrow, who had 1 year of awesome play. And my intuition is to say, well, the 3 times the size sample really matters. And that really makes me more confident in Baker Mayfield than Joe Burrow. I think that's natural.
Yeah, no, it was the way that we were operating for a while. But the hard part is here's a question, because I've always thought that way. But then I'm trying to think about Mayfield and what he's undergone in the NFL, which is 2 offensive coordinators, 2 head coaches, 2 number 1 receivers,
a couple of trips to the Cheesecake Factory,
many trips to the Cheesecake Factory, and I wonder how being in a situation where for 3 years you have basically the same infrastructure and succeed well, get very comfortable in that, how much that prepares you in a negative way necessarily for the changes that you have to undergo at the NFL level.
I think it's a really interesting point. So what you're saying is, okay, you're Baker Mayfield, you go to Oklahoma, you got Lincoln Riley, dude's a wizard, you have a bunch of talent at receiver, you have a great offensive line, everything is set there for you, and you kill it, as you should, because you're an accurate thrower of the football, you're a leader in the locker room, everything clicks for you. And then you get to the NFL and shit hits the fan. You've never experienced that before. We overvalued you maybe because we expected a situation that somewhat mimicked what you had in Oklahoma, and the reality of it is, no, you're very rarely going to get that. So we should almost just say, hey, like, maybe all of these guys are a lot closer together than we think, and their situation in college dictates a ton of that, but it's very unlikely that the situation in the NFL is going to be anything like that.
Yeah, and so then we turn it back and say, okay, because prior to doing this exercise, I was skeptical about Joe Burrow, because thinking to myself, okay, you know, he was basically a college average quarterback as a junior at LSU. And then he goes and you add Joe Brady, you put probably the best supporting cast in the entire country around him, and he becomes the best quarterback we've ever graded. And so how does that happen? So is it a negative that you can change the things to make him into the best quarterback we've ever seen, or is it a positive to look at him and say he was able to adapt to a situation which was good? Because I look at the landscape of the NFL, and I'm going to bring up a Kansas City Chief here. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, when he was Andrew Luck, kind of when he had his thing going, Aaron Rodgers for a time. there are a handful to maybe 10 quarterbacks for which nothing matters, for which you can probably throw anything at them, and you're going to get a elite quarterback even in the bottom percentile of his simulation. And then literally for every other guy, it could go either way. Andy Dalton could probably put up pretty damn good numbers in Andy Reid's offense. We'll probably get to see some quarterback at some point put up pretty damn good numbers in Josh McDaniels' offense at someday. All that kind of stuff. And they're crap otherwise, right? And for most, and so let's not fool ourselves, for most quarterbacks, even the guy picked number 1 overall, they're in that second group. And so to be able to adapt, right, to be able to, if you give me a great offensive coordinator, I can be good and elite. Maybe that's a skill set that we undervalue.
Now, here would be my pushback on that. What about Mitchell Trubisky?
But Trubisky, so here's the thing about Trubisky. And again, this is why I thought about this question, because Trubisky, his final season at UNC was pretty good. I mean, it was basically the same, fundamentally it was a little lower than Mahomes. But we didn't observe seasons N-1, N-2, N-3. And so when we were first doing the projections, we had Mahomes basically all of his data aggregated wholesale, and our projection for Mahomes was a little lower than Trubisky. And we didn't do projections back then, but it's kind of the way we thought about things, our graders and stuff like that. So, but at the same time, like we didn't observe that Trubisky year. Essentially, we're just assuming, if you're just using averages, that he was the same for all those seasons, which is probably wrong. So I think a better approach is to take the most recent seasons, assuming everybody plays their last season, and sort of take the prior seasons and weigh them somehow. So Mayfield still gets credit for being great as a sophomore, but he gets less of it than he was before. And to the point of, like, it's worth more than what Trubisky did, which is nothing, but it's not worth way more than what Trubisky did, because maybe Trubisky's sitting behind somebody great. Kyler Murray being an example of that, right? So it's sort of an interesting way to think about it. I don't think there's any perfect solution, but I do think that this one where you sort of weigh most immediate seasons higher is probably better.
Well, here's the other thing. There is the way that things happen in college, knowing you're going to the NFL is a super different world. So if you know you're not going to the NFL this year and you're just out there kind of balling out, and you have no pressure and you're just, everyone has experienced this to some extent, right? Like, you're playing in practice, you're nailing threes, you're throwing dimes, whatever it is. Right. Like, it's not a big deal because it's practice and it doesn't matter that much. And then all of a sudden you get all this hype and it's your final season and you know this matters. And that should matter more, because that is more indicative of what the NFL is like, right? We're talking about those situations than was the season before. So intuitively, I think that makes a ton of sense. And what's interesting looking at then this set of quarterbacks, right? You have Joe Burrow, for whom last year was an absolute disaster. And then you have Tua, for whom last year was phenomenal. Yep. And then this year was kind of like, well, okay, he got injured. He did play well. It wasn't quite as good, but he still has 2 really solid years. It's like, okay, well, I should be valuing this final season with a little bit more, because why? Well, they both knew they were going to the NFL draft, and the year before, nothing really mattered that much.
Yeah, for sure. And so you obviously weigh Burrow's junior year and Tua's sophomore year similarly, but I do think that you have to basically weigh them downwardly, right? And so there is a difference there, but then the stuff that we just saw from these two guys, I think, gets a little bit of an upweight. Obviously, that's not perfect, because some players play with injury late in their career. Todd Gurley was an example of a guy who tore his ACL.
Quarterbacks here.
Tore his ACL as a junior, I think it was a junior, right? He came out early, but nonetheless. But yeah, it also takes guys like Jordan Love, right, who was okay as a junior or sophomore. He's a junior when he came out. And as a junior, he was basically an average quarterback relative to the rest of the country. And I think that, to your point, if you think you're an NFL quarterback and for whatever reason you press or something like that and you perform worse, that's not a very good thing for you, in the future.
No, I'm with you. It's really interesting because the draft is all about people getting more excited than they should about every single prospect. That's what makes it exciting. You just don't know, and so people skew positively because it's way more fun to think about the really good end of things than the bad end of things. But the big takeaway that we have to have and have to ground ourselves in is that these guys don't have to be good. There doesn't have to be a great quarterback coming out of every single draft.
Yeah. Well, and they're not failures if they're league average. Like a league average NFL player is like a high expectation for a lot of them.
I'm sorry, sir. That's incorrect. If you were taking number 1 and you're league average, you are a failure.
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm not saying they're a failure. What I'm saying is that the projection, if you project them to be league average, you're probably closer to the truth than you project them to be a Hall of Famer, even the first overall pick.
Yes.
Yeah. So when people project, for example,
I was being sarcastic because every fan base would say, if I'm drafting a league average guy first overall, it's a failure.
Our friend and colleague Mike Renner tweeted out a mock draft where somebody had the 10th wide receiver on their list and compared them to Calvin Johnson, which, Calvin was the 2nd overall pick in 2007. He was also really good, but didn't have a 1,000-yard season until I think, 2009. And, if this 10th best wide receiver in the draft doesn't live up to Calvin Johnson, it's going to be okay.
Failure. All right, next up, Draft Captial. So we did this segment last week. We fucked it up massively. There were some issues on the scraping of the draft picks that created an incorrect tally.
There was also an issue with the lowest curve with draft picks near the end of the draft where there has been some, with the compensatory picks haven't always been the same amount of picks. So there were issues, I think, on both of our ends, but we have corrected them.
Anyways, we both fucked up. It doesn't matter how. We admit it. But we fixed it. And so this was a good conversation. And so I want to have this conversation again. So we'll start at the top here. The teams that have the most draft capital, and I feel more confident in this now, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Colts, the Jets, the Bengals, the Lions, the Browns, and the Chargers. So there's a lot of teams up there that are bad. But what I get drawn to are the teams that aren't that bad that still have a lot of draft capital. And so if I'm ranking those teams, I'm looking here, I'm like, okay, the Colts, they're not that bad. The Lions, they're not that bad. The Browns, honestly,
the Browns are way better than their record was last year.
Not that bad. And so I look at these teams and I'm like, man, there are actually some teams with a ton of draft capital that could legitimately improve their team, and not through the, free agent, I'm going to go sign a big free agent because that's usually a bunch of fool's gold, but actually building through young talent that can be sustainable.
Yeah, for sure. And it shows that there are opportunities. This is no one's discussed this as heavily as us over the past few years, but this is why teams go from worst to first and back, right? All the time. Because there are opportunities to replenish a roster with cheap talent, and whether that cheap talent be trading a 5th-round pick for Aqib Talib, as the Rams did once, or the Cowboys trade Michael Bennett, for example. But all these situations, you look at Detroit, right? Detroit are a top 10 team in terms of draft capital. No one else in their division is anywhere close, right? So when you look at them, they're 3-12-1, but a ton of close losses, good quarterback coming back, and a ton of draft capital, including what I think is a premium draft pick at 3 for all the teams that want the non-quarterback. They're in a good spot, and they're a team that could contend. Assuming Patricia and company get their act in gear, that's a good thing. Obviously, the Colts are another one. They got to figure out who their quarterback is, but they've been stocking up picks for a while now, and I think getting younger and better as a roster. Jacksonville's a team that has a terrible cap situation, right? Yep. So some of this stuff you have to look at in conjunction with those. But again, that's a team that doesn't have a lack of talent. They need a QB, but and then Brown, you look at Cleveland, right? If Cleveland gets things together in the next month or so, signs a couple, I would say mid-tier free agents, and then drafts really well, they could contend.
Absolutely. There are 3 to 4 of these teams that could legitimately contend. I also will say this. I don't think the Dolphins are that far away either. And here's why. There is a world in which the New England Patriots no longer have Tom Brady. And that could get really interesting, right? They could all of a sudden not be a great team anymore.
Right, and the other team in your division is coached by Adam Gase. The other team in your division is a quarterback named Josh Allen. Like sorry.
Be nice.
I know.
He's at least top 30.
Yeah, buckle up. So yeah, I agree. I think the Dolphins, the honest to God truth is the Dolphins are positioning themselves to have success in the AFC East. I mean, because they see it. They don't. Brady can't play till he's 50, and I think the Bills are one of the.
Can't?
The Bills have one of the best processes in the entire NFL. If you look at the way that they built their roster, defensively, back to front, offensively, they do the best job they can of hiding Josh Allen. And at the same time, it's difficult to hide a quarterback like that for that long. So while I think the Bills, if they got a quarterback, would be amazing, they're always going to be limited by the ceiling of Josh Allen. And then the Jets are just a team that's pretty good defensively, but an absolute disaster offensively. So there's a ton of opportunity for the Dolphins.
My favorite thing just about the whole Bills Josh Allen thing is everyone during the draft said, we need to draft this guy because he has a strong arm, he can throw it downfield, and he can throw it through the wind. And then what they did this year to make him better is they said, actually, we're going to have you throw the ball way shorter because you're so inaccurate throwing the ball downfield.
Well, and I think that's
which isn't, there's not a problem with that, but I just want people to understand that you're full of shit.
Yeah. Well, that's like when they took him ahead of Rosen, which ultimately so far Rosen has not gotten a great shake in the NFL, but he hasn't been good. Allen's been better than Rosen at least, but like Lamar Jackson was another one where it's like, you really traded because they were in such a great position because they had the Chiefs' #1 pick from the Mahomes deal. They could have used Mahomes, by the way, at 10. Just traded him.
How would he have done in Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's a Texas guy. So, and then they traded Cordy Glenn to the Bengals. They had 2 first-round picks in that draft, and they traded 2 of them up to get Allen and 2 of them up to get Edmonds. Both of them have been like starters for them, but like not reasons to trade up in the draft. No. And so, I don't know, man. There are some missed opportunities there. But again, I think from a 1 to 53, they're the best roster in the AFC East right now.
Yes. And so for that reason, the Miami Dolphins with 12 draft picks who have more than one
win above everybody else.
Yeah, so the way that we did this, by the way, is that I should have led with that, is we basically did an approximation, a prediction of what each pick is worth from a WAR perspective. What's your predicted wins above replacement for drafting someone in that with that selection, and then summed them up for all of your draft picks. So the Dolphins have 3.8 expected wins above replacement from their draft picks, which is more than 1 above the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are in second, and then everyone else is kind of bunched up together. So they have a real, huge amount of draft capital, more than everyone else. Here's the question, though. If they don't get a quarterback, but they improve their team enough to be decent, are they kicking themselves next year? Or are they good enough to go sign somebody?
Well, that sort of shows you how limited you are from the perspective of how limited individual players are to your success. So you talk about 3.8, that's over the 4 years of the rookie contract for most players. So it's less than 1 win per season. So an entire draft class over what you could ultimately acquire is still not going to move the needle from an average perspective all that much. What does, though, is obviously the quarterback who, the first overall pick, if it's a quarterback, the WAR per season is about 1. So that's really, so if the Dolphins are thinking about, they could do what the Browns did and continue to trade back, but what they shouldn't do is unload all these picks on non-quarterbacks, right? They should, if they're not going to go the quarterback route this year, then go the quarterback route next year. Destine yourself to do that. And again, Fitzpatrick's sort of the perfect quarterback to be competitive, develop players along with, but also to ultimately lose.
Yeah, man. I gotta say this though: if someone jumps you to get Tua and you have no chance to get Tua, I would try to just load up on next year's draft capital. Trading Devontae Parker, I'm getting out. I'm getting everything. There's just not. What am I gonna do?
Well,
be average.
So Parker and Howard are guys. Although Howard had troubles with the law at the end of the season, but Parker, Howard. Obviously, they had Christian Wilkins they drafted last year. Some of those players I think are useful for them. You can't just trade everybody. But yeah, the 89 Cowboys did, but the The issue is ultimately you're going to need some players on your team, and the problem was defensively they literally had. I mean, the fact that New England lost to them in Week 17 is an atrocity, given that they were basically rolling out 11 replacement players on their team on defense.
All right, let's go to the bottom of this group because there are some interesting things to take away from the people with the teams without draft capital. Let me see if you can pick out the sore thumb here.
Well, the Seahawks.
Can you just let me list them, please?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you. So the teams with the lowest amount of draft capital: the Houston Texans, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Los Angeles Rams, the Chicago Bears, the New Orleans Saints, the Kansas City Chiefs, Tennessee Titans, 49ers, Ravens, Seahawks. There are a few above that. But those teams, that group, what's one team that sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, obviously Seattle does because of their, they just have continuously traded picks over the years. Although last season they did a pretty good job of accumulating some back. They have not, and again, this is not necessarily a skill, but they have not drafted well of late, right? In terms of like the players that they've gotten have not produced for them. But you look at some of these teams, what do we think about the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward?
Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a quarterback at least.
Yeah, but again, it's similar here. Like the Houston Texans have a quarterback too, and the Rams technically have a quarterback too. But like those teams are sort of like for example, how is Goff? Goff is sort of in like this Daltarian like sort of space right now, right? Where if that team takes a significant dive from
fucking rough.
If that team takes a dive from a support standpoint,
wow,
what happens to Goff? And then subsequently, what happens to that team? Because that Bengals team was 12-4 in 2015, and then they're like 7-9-ish 2016.
Yeah,
now they're the worst team in the NFL. You look at obviously Pittsburgh, like they traded for Minka, right? They didn't get a whole lot back for Antonio Brown. Big Ben is probably on his last leg. So yes, I do agree that they could be okay, but they also won a lot of close games last year.
Mm-hmm.
The one, obviously, that's the worst, and again, I was just scrolling down, obviously, is Chicago, right? I mean, that's the worst one.
It took you 3 minutes to get to the Chicago Bears. But here is the difference between all those teams. Yeah, they're all in shitty situations because they don't have draft capital. That's just a fact. Even if you have Russell Wilson, and granted, the Seahawks have a little more draft capital than those teams at the bottom, like the Texans, Steelers, Rams, Bears, and Saints, and the Chiefs, that you can lump them in there too. But those teams all have a quarterback. Now, it might not be a quarterback that's going to play for the next 5 years, but the Bears don't even have a quarterback that you're like excited about. So to have no draft capital, man, to have no draft capital and no quarterback is a really bad place to be in.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, because where do you get out? You
have no. Is there a team in a worse position?
In the NFL, no. I mean, the Bears are the league's most troubled team. The only thing that they have is that maybe Matt Nagy's a good coach.
Yes, and maybe a good quarterback. Can you play both?
I don't know. And a few things also here.
Would you rather have Mitch Trubisky play quarterback and coach, or have Matt Nagy play quarterback and coach?
Nagy, because you can noodle arm these balls to what's his face, to Tariq Cohen. Also, notice here, they're in bad company in their own division, right? Minnesota, Green Bay, partly a product of how well they played last year, how good their records were, but they don't have great draft capital. Detroit, by virtue of how poorly they played last year, but also, the fact that they have their own 7 picks. But so again, we talk about, okay, every single year there seems to be a worst to first, or a team like San Francisco, which goes from third to Super Bowl. Like, how do you do that? Well, you do that. Well, what was San Francisco's formula this year? Quarterback comes back from injury, defense gets a lot better, and you play a third to fourth place schedule, right? Like, to me, if I'm looking at
a lot of turnovers.
Right, and you get turnover luck, right? Whereas the Detroit Lions, were not a turnover generating machine. If you are a fan of one team that might go worst to first, I think Detroit's the one that has a chance this year.
Yeah, especially because they're going to listen to me and take 2 at 3.
Well, they're
going to go worst to first in the long run.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately what matters more.
Because if you look at that entire division's in a tricky quarterback situation, right? Rodgers is not getting any better. In fact, there are some people, and we sort of agree with them,
in fact, he's getting significantly worse.
He's getting significantly worse. The Vikings, Kirk Cousins is not somebody. Kirk is the exact quarterback we were just talking about with Burrow versus Mayfield. You get him Stefanski, and he plays pretty damn well for a couple months. You get him DeFilippo, he looks horrible, right? Like Stefanski's gone, right? He's on the sort of lame duck season of his contract. Like, you could also make an argument that just taking Tua puts you unequivocally in the best quarterback situation in your own division, which is a place to be, right?
I think you could legitimately say that unless you are a team like the Chiefs, who has the best quarterback in the league by a mile and is young, there's no better position to be in than having a young guy who could potentially be a number one pick and a guy who's later on in his career who's still playing at a high level.
So here's a question just to piggyback off that, because I was thinking, okay, you take Tua, you have Stafford, right? And one of those, those two players are going to have value for a while. Matt Patricia is 9 and 23, 1 or whatever he is as an NFL head coach.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Lions fan, what do you want to happen more? Do you think that the ceiling is relatively high with Patricia, or is it sort of like the John Fox thing where you take Trubisky 1 year, stink for another year, get a new head coach, and then pop up, right, as a part of like this regime change? Or because that's really the only thing. If you're a Lions fan and you're like, okay, when is this team going to be good? Like, you have the head coach is really the question, right? They got rid of Caldwell. 3 out of his 4 seasons were winning seasons. They get Patricia, and so far all they've done is bottom out.
Oh, look, they're building for the future. The bottom line with this draft capital thing is that there are some teams that have traditionally been very good, like the Rams and the Steelers, who they don't have a lot of ways to retool, and there are some legitimate questions there at the quarterback position. The Texans are tricky because they don't have those questions, but they have leveraged a ton to try and build an environment around Deshaun Watson, and then you have the Bears, who we've talked about.
Yep.
All right. You have some mean tweets, apparently. You told me that you have a tweet that's particularly mean that you'd like to...
Well, we had this discussion.
Is this from YouTube?
No, this is
actually from Twitter.
And in fact, when I tweet about the Bills, I just sort of like mute conversation and run away, mostly. But one of our friends sent it back to me in a DM. He said from Steven Salerno, said, "This guy has a PhD in math and is trying to talk football, LOL. Go away, nerd. I'd love to see him throw a football," laughing emoji. "All I can think about is the Sandlot when Smalls throws the ball for the first time. Hi, my name is Eric. My hobby is math, but I also write about football." So I've been compared to Smalls, apparently.
People think that they're being mean. They need to step their game up.
I know. But my thing is, how lazy is this? Like,
it's very lazy.
How hey, my name's Fred. I got a PhD in math, so I'm disqualified from liking football. Or I like football, I'm disqualified from math. Like, how lazy is that?
Well, it's lazy because, this is like the most generic way of making fun of someone. Like, you're a nerd, so you don't know anything about sports. I don't know. I would challenge these people to be meaner.
Yeah.
Like all Packers fans do, or call people clowns.
Right.
Be meaner. Bills fans.
Because I didn't know carrying the G was something. Like, our friend Nagler has started to give people like...
Who?
Oh, Aaron Nagler, cheeseheadtv.com.gov. He was saying, this person carries the G when they're a Packers fan. I didn't know that was a thing. I lived in Wisconsin for 6 years. I didn't know what carrying the G was.
Is that like herpes?
Yeah, maybe. All I saw when I lived in Wisconsin was people carrying 12-packs down the side of the road.
Yeah, not working. All right, I have a story from not the Cincy Y, but just the gym in general.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Do you have any stories from
I have not been able to, partake.
Your only story is cane shopping.
I did go cane shopping. I didn't buy one, though. I didn't buy one.
You need to buy one. I'm going to go buy you one. Okay. I was in D.C. for the weekend. So the gym that I work out in there is just an apartment gym, and it's super small. And I was in there, and I had my headphones in. There was another person on an elliptical, headphones in, and then there was a dude like in the little other area doing some sort of press or something. We all had headphones in, and this guy just rips a massive fart.
Nice.
And now I honestly have no like real issue with this because at
Air's
least
over there just relieved at the what was ripped.
What was ripped? So like I didn't smell it because I was in the other room, and
But you heard it through the wall?
I heard it through the wall and through my headphones.
Respect, I guess.
Yeah. So my thought was this guy was trying to be courteous. He noticed the only other two people both had headphones in and were in the other section of the gym. So if he was going to rip ass, like this was the time to do it. And I think maybe you figured I would be mad at this, but I actually think this is a good call out to people for like, if you're going to do that in the gym, please be cognizant of where you are. So instead of doing it right next to someone, go to a part of the gym where no one else is, hope that everyone's headphones actually have music playing in them, and, try and be discreet.
Interesting. So I sort of was thinking about it differently because my thing is like the worst ones are the ones that smell that don't have a warning. So,
right.
So are you going to give this guy props for just like being outward about it?
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, you're trying to get a workout in. I can't be asking you to worry about whether it's loud or not.
I mean, this is a situation where it's like you just go to the bathroom and come back.
True, and I think that's the ideal situation. Sometimes, you're in the middle of a set and
you just let it go.
Like shit happens, literally. But I actually thought that was the right way to handle it for him. There also was no bathroom in this gym, so he would have had to like walk out of the gym. But at least he was cognizant of the headphone situation, the proximity. I appreciated that. Thought it was nice.
Okay.
For all of you farters in the gym, please be discreet. All right, that's a great way to end a podcast. There are a couple things that you should know. We're heading to Indianapolis next week, and we're gonna have a live show in the lovely city of Indianapolis.
Boom.
At a bar called the Tin Roof. It's going to be from 7 to 9 on Thursday evening. We're going to have some pretty cool guests. I can't start mentioning names because like confirmations are a tenuous thing in the NFL. It's just how things work.
Yep.
But I am pretty bullish on them. There also will be beer. There's rumors that there may be free beer. Which was the name.
We know that Chris listens to the podcast. So
Chris, if you're out there, we'd love some free beer. Free beer was also the name of some of my friends in college's band.
Oh, nice.
Had a cover band called Free Beer. So like you put it up there and be like, tonight, free beer. And the feeling was that people would just show up in droves for the free beer, and they'd end up with Blink-182 covers. And Ayers is too young to even know who Blink-182 is. So keep an eye out on that. If you want to head down to Indy, that is actually a reason to do so. Not many other reasons to head to Indianapolis, but that is one. So
yep. It'll be fun. We'll have I think more college to pro content coming up pretty soon, which is amazing.
Glorious.
Looking forward to all the 40 times and all that overreaction season.
You're looking forward to the St. Elmo's. Is what you're looking forward to. You like good.
Can't hate it.
All right, that's our show. We'll be back with you guys on Thursday. Peace out.